Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Double Play. We're back with some more free agency news, and this one was a big one. There were some big pieces to drop, and a trade with Sean Murphy to the Braves. Jack, how are you? We're back in person. We're in the same room again, and so we're back. And so, Jack, you want to get us started? We had some big moves, and lots of money being dealt out.
Yeah, absolutely. There were just some contracts that went out that I think a lot of people expected these players to get big deals, but it was kind of all back to back, and it was boom, boom, boom. Just these big contracts for some epic level players in Major League Baseball. Before we get to the big signings of Carlos Correa, Carlos Rodon, we're going to go in chronological order, which means, Ryan, we got to start with the trade that sent Sean Murphy to the Atlanta Braves, not the defending world champions anymore, but the 2021 MLB World Series champions. Trade for their catcher of the future.
Yeah, it's a good one. Obviously, it teams them up with. They're now the Oakland Braves or Atlanta A's, however you want to say it. Teams them up with Matt Olson at first, who they traded for last year. It was a big 3-team trade, and I think the Braves definitely get an upgrade. They do get rid of their all-star. I think he was an all-star as a DH, but all-star catcher in William Contreras, who goes to the Brewers. And the last team was obviously the A's, who they got Sean Murphy from, and they sent a couple prospects there. So this one was a big one. And so as for the Braves, they get Kyle Mueller, which was the Braves' number one prospect. Second year in a row that the Braves trade their number one prospect to the A's. Last year was Christian Pache in that Matt Olson deal. And the A's also get Esteury Ruiz from the Brewers, who was traded in the Josh Hader trade from the Padres. So he's on his way back to the West Coast to be a part of the A's organization. So let's start off. Do you like this return for the A's? I saw a lot of people not so much liking this, but I mean, two solid prospects in return.
Yeah, it's just like they might get good players, but it's the same thing for the A's every time, where they're clearly not getting the value of the player that they're trading away. You can't tell me that the guys they got last year are worth what Matt Olson is worth, and you saw that in the way that they played in year one in Oakland. And this year, while you're getting some top prospects, it's just clearly not at Sean Murphy's level. Sean Murphy was a 5-6 WAR player last year, and instead you're getting, a couple pieces that in Oakland are eventually, even if they're good, going to be traded away like Sean Murphy. So it's a 3-team trade where I think 2 teams are clearly winners, but the A's, again, just showing that they do not really care about building a good baseball team, and the players that they do hit on and do develop pretty well from their farm system, they're just getting traded away. So it's one in a long line of pretty, depressing trades for the state of Major League Baseball, with some of these franchises that clearly do not care about winning.
Let's talk about that. The A's, I think the only thing that's going to save this franchise is moving to Las Vegas. It's going to hopefully increase their spending with it, but it's clear that they just can't build a successful, sustainable model in Oakland. They'll get good players, and like we saw a few years ago, they were good for a couple years in a row, but never passed the wild card round. They won 100 games a couple times. But without moving to Vegas, without increasing that spending, without not even signing free agents, but just signing guys that you develop, because you can good development can only do you so much if you don't keep those players. So I think one thing is the A's have to move to Vegas in order to be competitive again, I think, or at least move to somewhere that will be more profitable. And right now it would look like that would be Vegas, but I think that's where the A's need to go in their next big move.
Yeah, but honestly, no one really cares about the A's right now. Let's talk about the returns for the other 2 teams, and let's start with one who went out and did that big fishing. That was the Atlanta Braves. Second straight offseason that they've gone to Oakland to try and bring over a big star from the A's, and this time it's Sean Murphy. They didn't really have a hole at catcher, but they clearly get better. Sean Murphy, one of the top 3 catchers in all of baseball. Do you like this for Atlanta, and how much?
I do like it a lot. It adds a little bit of consistency to a catcher position that was it wasn't weak for the Braves, but it was one of their weaker positions. They're strong seemingly all across the board. So they definitely get a lot of consistency in Sean Murphy. It's going to be a player that's going to be great for them and add some certainty to that catcher role. And they get rid of William Contreras, and now you can flex Sean Murphy with Travis d'Arnaud sometimes when he needs a break, and Travis d'Arnaud, you don't completely lose his bat, which can be good at times, or it's that one's seemingly hit or miss. He's either one of the better hitting catchers or one of the worst hitting catchers. So you can at least flex him there at the DH since you get rid of William Contreras. But I do like this for the Braves, and it's a move in a pretty quiet offseason for them that think they needed to do something with the Phillies and Mets both getting better, and I like it for them and giving them pretty good chances to repeat as the division winner and go back into a deep playoff run.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think that maybe you're not giving the Braves catcher room enough credit. I think d'Arnaud and William Contreras formed to make one of the better catching rooms in baseball, and there aren't many good ones in the MLB. Adding Sean Murphy, it does make them better. I mean, clearly he's a top 3 catcher that improves on what they had. I've even seen arguments that maybe he's the best catcher in baseball, the second best catcher in baseball. So I think it does make them better. But for me, it's just weird considering that I thought they came into the offseason with far bigger needs, especially filling that shortstop position. They let Dansby Swanson go. He went to the Chicago Cubs on a deal we'll talk about later. And maybe they're comfortable with Vaughn Grissom stepping in and playing short. Maybe there's been talks about moving Ozzie Albies over to short. But overall, I just thought that while the move to bring Sean Murphy to Atlanta clearly made them a better team, I just didn't know if it should have been their top priority. Like, I thought that they had bigger holes that they could fill outside of the catcher position.
Yeah, you're right. They do get a little bit better at catcher, but they also get a little worse at shortstop, and maybe more than a little worse. But so I think all in all, it's probably a chalk for the Braves. They don't get much better, but they don't get much worse. So that they're still the same 100-win team that they were before, and they're going to get an extra year of developing these guys. Hopefully, you get a better season from Matt Olson who settles in. So I expect them to be around the same win total that they were at last year.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about the Brewers a little bit. I think this is a good little move for Milwaukee. They get William Contreras, who is now going to be their starting catcher, you would assume, with Omar Narvaez signing with the Mets on a deal that just made no sense to me. But William Contreras, I think, slots in well in Milwaukee. They gave up Esteury Ruiz, even though they just got him from the San Diego Padres, so he's bouncing around very quickly to a bunch of different franchises. But overall, I think a little move for the Brewers, intertwining themselves in this little 3-team trade. I think they got better for it.
I do agree with that. They got better, but it doesn't really make sense to me. It's not better enough to put them as a playoff team. And so it's just, where are they at right now? And you get the feeling that they're going to ride it out with what they got, and if it doesn't stick, then they're going to be big sellers at this deadline, and that they have some pieces, and it just, that could be very, very chaotic to see come trade deadline if that's the path they end up going. Because, I mean, we saw last year, this team is not really that much different. They missed the playoffs last year. They add William Contreras. I don't think it makes them better enough to be a playoff team. Maybe they'll be in contention. So we'll see what they do come time. But I think they get better, but I don't know if I like it from a franchise perspective.
Yeah, I think it's more of a sign of the times, where the Brewers have been making some deals this offseason. This is the second trade they've been involved in. They also, I think, they shipped Colton Wong to Seattle for Jesse Winker. And it's kind of these deals that maybe make them better, but also they're kind of just a net average, where I think that they're not trying to spend too much more money. They don't want to get super involved. They're clearly not a team like the Dodgers or the Padres or the Giants, like we've seen this offseason, who are going to spend their bottom dollar to try and compete. They seem like they're happy with the amount of money they're spending right now, so they're trying to make these moves that could potentially slightly improve their roster. And at this point, they all come out to seem like net averages, but it's sometimes the little steps. They were behind the Cardinals for the majority of last season, but they've got some pieces that if they play up to their full potential, like a Jesse Winker now, even like William Contreras, we saw have an all-star first half, they could potentially try and find their way back into the playoffs.
Now let's get into the biggest signing that was this past week, and it was Carlos Correa to your San Francisco Giants. 13 years, $350 million, largest contract in Giants history. It really capped off a huge spending offseason for them, and I'm just going to leave this one to you. What are your thoughts? I know you liked this one, but let's hear it.
I'm just going to start it with a let's go. The Giants bring in Carlos Correa. They get screwed over on Aaron Judge by John Hyman, but then they bounce back and give Carlos Correa an absolutely massive deal. I think he becomes clearly, like you said, the biggest contract in Giants history. I would say the biggest blockbuster player since this man right here behind me, Buster Posey, and he's going to go down when his career is said and done as a San Francisco Giant. They clearly like his potential at shortstop. They want him to be the face of the franchise, I think, alongside Logan Webb for the next 13 years or however long he rides that contract out. But you're right, a 13-year contract, $350 million. A lot of people think it's too much. I think that that's kind of what you need to pay for a player of Carlos Correa's caliber. Coming into this offseason, I mentioned to you off camera that I was thinking I maybe wanted Correa more than Judge in some scenarios, or at least some part of me was thinking that might be better in the long run for the Giants, which is no slam on Judge. I think it's just a testament to what Correa has done over the past couple of seasons. I'm going to read off some stats to you. This is since 2019, so since the 2019 season and on. He was third in WAR over 162 games among shortstops, fourth in WRC plus among shortstops in that same span, first among DRS, fifth in OAA, and the best walk rate among shortstops. So he's a big player. He's maybe he doesn't stick at shortstop for his entire career, but I think he's got skills that translate. He's still only 28 years old. This was kind of the market price where all the shortstops this offseason getting signed until they're 41 years old. So while a lot of people are going to complain about the money, I think it's a good deal for a great player that I think is going to go down as one of the best Giants of the 2000s. And I really love the deal, and I'm glad that the Giants finally went out there and spent the money that we know that they have.
Yeah, I think the contract is fair. You're good with that, and they're getting a guy who not just has all those all those stats that you just mentioned, but they're also getting a guy who can perform in the postseason. And that gets into my little issue with the contract is they have to get to the postseason for that to matter a lot, and they're good. They're going to be in the conversation definitely this year, especially with the expanded postseason. They were the first team out last year, or they were close to it. Second team out, maybe behind the Brewers, and like we just talked about the Brewers. So with the Giants, they're going to be in the discussion. But for a guy you're paying so much money for, and just 13 years is so risky, and to pay that for so long, to me, it felt like what you had to pay him, and it felt like almost a win, not necessarily a win now, but win in the immediate future type of move. So I was telling you before, I think this contract will very much be, the success of this contract will very much be determined by what the Giants do in the next couple of years, next few years to build a team around him and get that team to the postseason. Because like we saw with the Phillies, once you get to the postseason, anyone has a chance. So I think as long as you're in the postseason in the next few years, then this will be a great move for the Giants. But if you wait 5-6 years and now Correa's 34 and he can't move as well at shortstop, and you're still paying him 28 million, whatever it was per year, I think that will end up hurting them more than it helps them. So because you're committed to that annual value until he's 41. So if you don't compete with him while he's in his prime, you're now paying someone $28 million for someone who's in the back half of his career. So this move will very much be determined based off what they do and what the team they build around him in the next coming years. And it could be one of the best moves they've ever made, or it could also very much hurt them for the future years.
Well, now I know you like to forget about this season, but I will remind you that in 2021, they did win 107 games. And despite what I think a lot of people would describe as kind of a worst-case scenario year last year, where they just looked completely dysfunctional, they couldn't field, sometimes they couldn't hit, the bullpen really took a step back, they still managed to go 500. In a year where, I thought 500 would be a good season in 2021, I thought it was a bad season in 2022, and they still were right on the edge of the playoffs. They were still 500. I think they get better this offseason. I think it's a wash. You bring in Carlos Correa, you lose Carlos Rodon. So I think for this upcoming year, those two players maybe cancel out. But you also brought in Mitch Haniger. You brought back Jock Peterson. You also brought in Ross Stripling and Sean Manaea, who even if they hit on one of those, like they've hit on pitchers in the past, I think the rotation is going to be fine without Rodon. I really think that Correa does help them become a playoff team, which I think that they were a playoff team last year, and then they just kind of choked themselves out of it. And this year coming off of a 500 season, I really think that they should be considered in playoff consideration. People forget the Phillies just managed to sneak their way into the playoffs, and look where they ended up. So I think the Giants can make their way back there. They're one season removed from 107 wins and winning the NL West, being the one seed in the National League. So a lot of people are going to write this team off because there still are some no-name guys on the roster. You might be starting J.D. Davis at first base or Lamont Wade in left field. You've got Joey Bart behind the plate. Who knows who's going to be playing third base, whether it's Crawford or Correa, but they're kind of a team of misfits, but they have added some star power with Mitch Haniger. You also add Carlos Correa, who's the superstar player in this roster. So people are going to write off the Giants, I think, like they did a couple years ago. It worked last year where they only went 500, but I think they still are a playoff team, and I think that they can get back to the postseason. And when they do with Carlos Correa, like you mentioned, he absolutely matches in the postseason. It's something that I'm going to get used to watching. I'm going to be happy about it.
One other thing, I always remind you of this when you talk about the 2021 season. You had an almost MVP season from Brandon Crawford, and you had a great year from Brandon Belt. Evan Longoria had a resurgence. You had that team was led by all these guys in the back half of their career. Buster Posey too. All these guys having a resurgence of their careers. So, which Buster Posey's gone. Evan Longoria looks to be pretty much gone now. Brandon Belt, still a free agent, but looks to be gone. All those guys that kind of led that team are gone, so or close to it. So you do have some pieces. Lamont Wade had that was a crazy year. That was something he will never do again. Yes, they're still a solid team, but I don't think they're not going to win anywhere close to 106 games with their current roster. And so I think it'll be. They very much have potential to put a team together that does that, but there's still a few more holes that maybe you're. I don't think you can really compare losing Rodon to Correa. Obviously, in terms of team value, obviously huge boost to the lineup, but with a pitching, I think they have a subpar pitching staff right now, which will that's just it won't be a playoff team over the course of 162 games.
Well, here's what I'll say. You're right that, they had that from Crawford and Belt, and they had Posey, and Longoria was playing at his best all in 2021. But as I've brought up, even with all of those things not happening in 2022, Brandon Belt didn't play for much of the year. Brandon Crawford was absolutely terrible. Buster Posey was retired. They still managed to win 81 games. They somehow slogged their way into being a 500 team, which is a lot better than you can say about different teams in the National League. And I think that they've gotten... They've clearly gotten better than the Milwaukee Brewers. They've had a better offseason than the Brewers. The Phillies brought in Trey Turner, but I think the Giants have made some more overall moves, and they've shown in 2021 that they can be a more disciplined team at times than a team like the Philadelphia Phillies. So I think that they are still... If they're building up from 500 with adding Carlos Correa and Mitch Haniger and then bringing in two pitching projects, which they've hit on in the past. I mean, you look at a guy like Kevin Gausman, who's now pitching for the Blue Jays. The Giants took a big gamble on him. Same with Carlos Rodon. It wasn't as big of a gamble, but they turned him into a Cy Young candidate, and they did the same thing last year with Alex Cobb, who, while the results didn't follow because the defense kind of sucked, they turned him into a pretty good two-starter. So I disagree with you saying it's a subpar pitching staff. I think Logan Webb's a good ace. He's going to bounce around between a 2.8 and a 3.2 ERA, I would assume, for most of the year. I think Alex Cobb's a good too. Ross Stripling had a great year last year. Sean Manaea, while he wasn't great in San Diego, profiles to be one of those guys that the Giants have worked on in the past and gotten more out of than he's shown in his past spots. And he was good in Oakland as well, I'd like to remind you. And then also you've got Alex Wood, you have Anthony DeSclafani. They still have Jacob Junis, who they made look pretty good last year when they told him to pretty much throw only sliders. And they've got the best left-handed pitching prospect in baseball in Kyle Harrison waiting in the wings. So there's 7 guys right there, which, or that's 8 guys actually. If they can find a way to find 5 starters, which they've clearly done in the past in 2021 and 2022, I think it's at least average or an above average starting rotation. And that's, assuming that some of those guys don't have even better seasons like we've seen possible. So
that's something that will remain to be seen for the 2023 season and beyond. Let's move on from Carlos Correa to Carlos Rodon, who went to the Yankees. The Giants lost him for 6 years, $165 million, and that was a big one for the Yankees. Their rotation now is Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon, Nestor Cortez. I believe all of those first 3 were All-Stars last season. Then you get Luis Severino and Frankie Montas, who have both been All-Stars in the past. this definitely looks like to be in the best rotation in baseball. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't think that I can't remember a time where I've seen a better rotation than this over the past couple of years even. You talk about Carlos Rodon, who I just mentioned, sucks for the Giants to lose because he was so absolutely fantastic. 31 starts in 2022. He had a 6.2 WAR, 2.88 ERA, 2.25 FIP, 33.4 K percentage. He was dominant, and I watched pretty much every one of his starts. He's got the most valuable fastball in baseball according to Fangraphs and a lot of other websites. He has a great slider, just devastating. The velocity, he's so good. I think I would be confident to say that he might win a Cy Young at some point in New York. And it's crazy that he'll slot in as a 2, which he clearly would be the number 1. I would say he's a top 7, possibly even top 5 pitcher in all of baseball. I'm very confident that this contract's going to work out for New York, and it definitely makes them the best rotation in baseball.
And now, do you think with having the best rotation in baseball and re-signing Judge, is this enough to get past the Astros in the American League?
So you and I last offseason, this is probably our biggest L, was thinking that the Yankees might even come in 4th in the American League East. I'm not going to go as far as to say they're not going to win the East, but I still think we were right at the end that they just are not better than the Astros. And the Astros ended up sweeping the Yankees 4-0 in the ALCS to get to the World Series. And even though they add Carlos Rodon and bring back Aaron Judge, it's not like they're much different of a team. And I don't think just bringing in Rodon is going to push them past the American League champs the World Series champs, who also got better bringing in Jose Abreu. They're going to have Michael Brantley back now. I think that the Astros got better. I know the Yankees got a lot better. The rotation is amazing. But, they had probably the best performing rotation in baseball last year for the majority of the year, and they still couldn't get past the Astros in the end. So I'm not going to go as far as to say it's impossible, but I think the Astros are still my favorites in the AL.
For me, I think the Astros will definitely be the odds favorite to win the American League again and maybe even the World Series for this coming year. But I think it's going to be very close. Just we've seen how hard it is to repeat in baseball. It's a little different getting to the World Series, which is the issue we're discussing. Whereas the Astros, we've seen them do that last year, this year. They did 2017, just short in 18 and 20, but they did it in 19. So the Astros are always there. So I think anything can happen still in the playoffs. And the Yankees, with that rotation, that was kind of what they struggled with going into the playoffs last year. That's why they added Frankie Montas, because they needed a guy who would be a Game 2 starter. Now, Frankie Montas you're getting as your 5th starter going into the season with the addition of Rodon and some guys back healthy. So I think for the American League, for me, it's a 3-team race right now between the Astros, between the Yankees, and the other team I really like is the Blue Jays going into this year. And I think those are the 3 teams. If I had to pick right now, it would be one of those 3 teams to represent the American League in the World Series. And like we've seen in the playoffs, anything can happen. And I think any of those teams can beat each other in any given 7-game series. But the Astros are still definitely the favorites.
So you're finally off the White Sox train. It took you
not happening again.
Took you long enough. Let's recap some of the smaller moves that have happened, and I guess a bigger one, but it just happened yesterday or 2 days ago. Dansby Swanson to the Cubs for a 7-year, $177 million contract. You also have Andrew Benintendi signing with those White Sox after a 122 WRC plus in 2022, and then Joey Gallo to the Twins, got a new location, a new destination on a 1-year deal. Overall, let's start with the Dansby Swanson deal. What are your quick thoughts?
It's for the Cubs. It's a very interesting one. I think it's a little bit of an overpay. It's 7 years. I mean, comparatively, it's not a long time to what the other shortstops get, but that's a long time for someone who has proven to be pretty volatile in his performance in the past. We've seen great season. Last year was a pretty good season from Dansby. We've also seen pretty poor seasons from him, and so you're paying a guy. You're paying him more than the Dodgers are playing Freddie Freeman, which is pretty crazy to me. They're both Braves free agents coming out of it, and Dansby gets paid more than both annually and total contract than Freddie Freeman. That's got just interesting comparison to me, especially because the Dodgers were paying him. I feel like that'd be more, but I feel like it's a little bit of overpay for the Cubs. They have gotten a lot better with Bellinger and Dansby. They do lose Contreras. So this is another team I'm not really sure of their future, what it will look like, and it'll see how it plays out. But with that one, I kind of thought it was a little bit of an expensive contract for the Cubs.
I think when you look at Dansby too, while he had his big moments, I think he was pretty good for a majority of the year. The peripherals were a lot better than they have been in the past. Still a guy that didn't even touch an 800 OPS and has never touched that in his career. And to give him a $177 million contract, and they didn't get roped into a 13-year deal like the Giants did with Correa, but still 7 for 177 for a guy that's never been great, never been elite. I think he was, pretty good this year, but he's been bad in the past, and I don't even think that this season was one where he just completely blew off the page and made you forget about those last couple seasons. Because in the end, I think he was around a 770 OPS, just above league average, hitting-wise, I think like around a 120 WRC plus, and a lot of projections that I've seen this year have him being, right around league average or just above league average hitting-wise. He brings you, a good glove. He'll be a marketable player, but overall, I think you're right. It is maybe a little bit of an overpay considering we've seen one pretty good season from Dansby Swanson, and the fact that got him 7 years for $177 million with all the other free agents at the shortstop position on the market. I think it maybe is a little bit of an overpay, but probably what the Cubs needed to do considering he was the last one on the market and they were competing with teams like potentially the Dodgers, other teams that were in the mix. So I think it's an overpay for the Cubs. They're clearly trying to compete. I think they can maybe sniff passing the Brewers in the NL Central, but just kind of a weird team with, I think, some high highs in Dansby Swanson, Seiya Suzuki, you have Marcus Stroman, you still have Ian Happ, but the rest of the roster, I think, is not fantastic. So I really haven't loved what the Cubs have done in the past couple of years, and I think this is another head-scratching contract to me for a team that I think is maybe getting ahead of themselves a little bit when it comes to competing.
Absolutely. It's still some holes there in that team. With Gallo to the Twins, I kind of like that one. It's a solid fit. It's a fresh start for him, like you said. And there's a chance he could be a great again with no shift this coming season. I feel like there's going to be a lot of unpredictabilities. Some guys who have benefited from the shift, some guys who have been harmed by the shift that will completely just have their coming out party. So it's going to be. It could be a very positive for the Twins and Joey Gallo, and maybe a resurgence to his career, and low risk on that 1 year deal for the Twins. And with Benintendi to the White Sox, I kind of like this one. I think you didn't at the time, but I mean, what I was surprised to learn, I think it was 5 years, $75 million was the numbers, and it was the biggest contract in White Sox history, which that shocked me to learn. And so Benintendi, he goes to the White Sox on not a big contract, but the biggest in White Sox history. You want to talk about that one a little bit? Because I don't think you liked the fit.
It's not. I don't think it's the fit. I've never been Benintendi's biggest fan, and I think that while he is an above average hitter, I just don't think he really moves the needle. And for a team like the White Sox to hand out what is their biggest contract in team history to Andrew Benintendi, when I think that they've got a lot of other dysfunction to work through, I don't think the answer is going to be bringing in Andrew Benintendi. So maybe, while I had a negative reaction to the deal initially, it's not because of Benintendi. I just think it's overall the White Sox, it's just not I don't think it's a needle moving move. So I don't think it's going to fix all their problems. I saw some people really liking the deal. So maybe my knee-jerk reaction is not reflective of what I think of just the value or Benintendi as a player. But just, I think the overall, I've never really liked what the White Sox have been doing recently in the upper management department. And so bringing in Andrew Benintendi, I don't think is going to solve their problems. And I think they've got other things to focus on outside of bringing in a new left fielder.
I kind of disagree with that. I think Benintendi, he's not going to turn him into World Series contenders or anything, but I think it does move the needle a little bit more than you're giving him credit for. You look at the White Sox lineup last year. There was Jose Abreu, Eloy Jimenez. Oh my goodness.
Yohan Moncada. Yasmani Grandal had a bad year.
But go through all, the majority of those guys. Those are right-handed hitters. And so I saw this tweet a while ago. I've got it pulled up. The White Sox were 23rd in the MLB against right-handed pitchers last year by WRC plus, and their left fielders combined for a -6 WRC plus last year, or defensive runs saved last year, -6. And so Andrew Benintendi hits 286 in his career against right-handed pitching, so you're getting good there. and he's been an above average, even a Gold Glove winner in seasons before in left field. So you're getting a guy and so that really fills that hole that you've struggled with in the past. So I think maybe Andrew Benintendi as a player, like on paper, doesn't like move the needle for a team that much, but in terms of what they struggled with and what they need, I think this will be a good one for the White Sox. But I will give you the credit, they have more pressing issues to attend to, and we'll see how it plays out this season. If they're going to address those or not, we'll still see.
Yeah, and I think they're kind of bang on having an average offseason because you lose Jose Abreu, you add Andrew Benintendi. That might even be, a net loss for the White Sox, even though you needed a left-handed bat in there. I think I kind of see it like the Blue Jays, where they trade away Teoscar Hernandez simply because they needed to get some left-handed bats in the lineup. But overall, I guess maybe I'm just still traumatized by all the damage that the White Sox did to us last year, having just one of the most disappointing seasons in the MLB. So we'll see, hopefully, that they can come back because there's so much talent on that squad that they really need to win at some point. Let's move on quickly before we get to our draft to end the episode. Next year, there's some big moves that still remain, and I want to ask you one specific question because I think it's a reason that the Dodgers haven't spent a lot of money this offseason. What do you think Shohei Ohtani's contract is going to look like next year? And early on, who do you think could be some contenders?
I think it'll be I think the Angels will have a chance just because they're the incumbent, and then it'll be the big spenders because that'll get into what I think this contract will be. I think it'll be Dodgers, Mets, Yankees will be the big three, and I think outside maybe you get a shocker, but I think if I had to bet on it, it'd be one of those four teams right there. And in terms of the contract, I honestly have no clue. I thought I had an understanding, or at least an expectation of what it would be going into this offseason, but kind of seeing the focus switch this year to many more years on the contract. Carlos Correa getting 13, Trey Turner and Bogarts both getting 11. I felt like that was the kind of the focus going. They're all signed until they're 41 years old. That was kind of the focus going with this offseason. So I think this contract could end up looking somewhere. I think it'll still be around 7 to 8 years is what he gets at around $45 million a year, which would, I don't know the math on that one, but I think teams are still going to be a little wary of how he's going to age because you kind of, just because we've never seen this before, you kind of lean towards something has to give. And is he going to be able to be this pitcher, this caliber pitcher forever? Is he going to be able to keep up hitting or both at the same time? Is one of them going to have to go? And I think something that will very much determine it, the Angels, I believe it was Phil Nevin, came out and said that they're going to be using a Shohei Ohtani a lot more pitching this season. He's going to be getting more innings while they've kind of tried to pace him in the past. He's going to be getting more innings this year, and we're going to see if that hurts his hitting or if he's able to eat all those innings. And I think that will very much determine what his contract looks like. And if he's able to keep that up, it's going to be an insanely large deal.
Yeah, and maybe some of the teams that have made some moves to bring in guys on longer deals are looking to do that because they want to sign Shohei next year to a shorter deal, but give him the AAV that they're not giving to these players that are on the longer contracts. He's 28 right now, so he'll be 29 next offseason. You could see him get a deal. He could get, a 12-year deal worth more than Correa, or you could see guys take off those years, give him more money up front because they maybe don't want to deal with that contract or potentially an injured Shohei Ohtani later on. I started last week in the draft, and today we're doing an MLB logos draft. Ryan, since I started last time, why don't you take the first pick and pick your first overall logo?
Wow, first I gotta pick the best logo here. That's a tough prompt to give me, but I think if I'm gonna go with a logo that it's just pretty to look at. It's a good play on what the team is. I'm gonna go with the Kansas City Royals. With the little crown on top. I think that's a good looking with the blue and the gold. It's just great for Royals colors. I just love it.
A great player in our league, but I think you jumped the gun for sure. I'm going to take first overall the St. Louis Cardinals, which is the best logo in baseball with the two birds. You got the bat. I think overall superstar. So glad that I was able to get that at the 1-2.
And at the second round, I'm going to go with the Blue Jays. You get the bird. You get the homage to Canada with the little maple leaf in there. Just looks good. Blue Jay, just beautiful.
Yeah, right there, 1 and 2 on my board, I had Cardinals and Blue Jays, so I think that's a good pick. You get good value in the second round. I'm going to pull it off with another one that I think is the cleverest logo in baseball, and that's the Milwaukee Brewers. Of course, you look and you think it's a glove, and then you look even closer, and you've got an M and a B for Milwaukee Brewers. I think it's the cleverest logo in baseball. They clearly found a way to sneak in a hidden meaning. I love the Milwaukee Brewers logo.
That was a good pick. That definitely a superstar in this league that will always be a superstar, and just it's a solid one. The next one I'm going to go with another one that I like about this one, homage to the city, the Phillies. You get the Liberty Bell in there, just beautiful, the Phillies, and just what that means for the city of Philadelphia. I mean, when you're named after the city, you got to have something in the logo about your city. So the Philadelphia Phillies, amazing.
Yeah, ring that bell. I had the Phillies at 5th on my board, so I think that's fair. 4th on my board, still available here for me in the 3rd round. I'm going the Baltimore Orioles. I love the color, and I love the bird. I think it's a great pick. I was hesitant between where to put them compared to the Phillies. You took Phillies off the board, so I'm going Baltimore.
So this one might surprise you. We're in the 4th round now. I'm going to go with the Red Sox. You get 2 Red Sox, and it's different from all the other ones, and I kind of like that. It's not afraid to go its own way. It's got its own style of play, and it's a superstar in its own right, and it can catch people off guard with just being 2 Sox and not letters like the other ones.
Yeah, he's an old-timey Grizzly veteran. Doesn't need no letters, no words, no animals. He's just 2 Red Sox, and I think that it's definitely still got a place in our league. I had him at 10th spot on my board. I'm going to go with a newcomer, and one that maybe I'm higher on than most, but I really love the new Cleveland Guardians logo with the 2 G's and the wings and the baseball. I'm a big fan. Newcomer, rookie. I think that it could be a potential steal in the 4th round. I'm going with the Cleveland Guardians.
That definitely was a good pick that I was considering. And so now my last pick, I'm choosing between a couple here. A lot of good players still left on this board, but I think I'm going to go with the New York Mets. You get the skyline in the background, which is also a baseball, with the Mets script across the front. Great role player, someone you need on your team, energy guy.
Yeah, clearly the best player on the board. I was going to go with the Mets if you didn't take him. So I'm going to finish it off. I think similar to your first overall pick, I think I need someone to guard the Royals one-on-one. I'm going to go with the Los Angeles Angels with the A and the halo. I think it's similar to the Kansas City Royals. I think they match up one-on-one on defense pretty well. So I'm going to take the Angels to round out in my 5th spot.
That's who I was deciding between. Great player. Glad they didn't go undrafted, and they're going to have a great career in this league.
Well, Ryan, I think that's all we've got for this episode. We're not going to make it like last week where we didn't have enough time to roll out the outro. So with about a minute to go in our Zoom meeting, why don't you bring us home?
Thank you guys for listening. We've been the Double Play Podcast. Make sure you tune in next week. We will be having our Christmas special episode where we'll be ranking our top 25 for Christmas, top 25 MLB players. And we've been Double Play. Make sure you guys follow all our socials. If you're on Spotify or Apple, they're down below in the description. If you're on YouTube, they're right above you. Make sure you follow all of our socials. Make sure you follow us. And we've been Double Play. Thank you guys so much. And we'll be back next week for a Christmas special. Merry Christmas.